So when creating season 19 of Doctor Who, new script editor Anthony Root had to go through multiple scripts as producer John Nathan Turner was on holiday. When Root read the first script, being Project Zeta Sigma, he didn't enjoy it, and when also read by previous producer Barry Letts, they agreed to work on the second script first, being To Doomsday. Eventually, this became the first story made for the Fifth Doctor, with the first day of shooting happening on Peter Davison's 30th birthday. This also is the very first story of the show to not have any appearance of the Fourth Doctor since The Monster of Peladon in 1974. So, this story aired in 4 parts, from the 18th of January 1982 to the 26th of January 1982. This story was written by Terence Dudley and directed by John Black. So starting off with part 1, we have the overcrowded TARDIS team, ready to drop off Tegan at Heathrow Airport. Now, I don't know how much time has it been since Castrovalva, but it is really obvious that this is the first filmed, as everyone has shorter hair, except Tegan, who has these weirdly long sideburns for some reason. So they eventually land on what they think is Earth, but it isn't because they were sucked into the spaceship via magnetic field, or Adric actually just miscalculated the coordinates. So the Doctor puts on this space helmet and exits the ship, where he sees this camera thing called a monopticon, as it floats above and spies on him. As this happens, Adric decides to say this interesting statement about women.
That's the trouble with women. Mindless, impatient, and bossy.
You chauvinist, I heard that.
You were meant to.
I heard it too. You mean this? Mindless.
Well, yes, but you're not a woman.
I'm not?
No, you're only a girl.
I will say that this arrogant line does begin this sort of evil Adric throughout this story, as he acts extremely dumb and sides with the bad guys. I will also say that I find it a bit strange that he calls Nyssa only a girl, when they're about the same age, and she's also shown to be smarter than him in this story. So I don't know why he has this out-of-pocket sexist rant, to be honest. Like when previous companion Jamie McCrimmon made similar statements, it could be sort of defended because he was from an earlier and more sexist time period. But Adric is from the far future in E-space, and yet he just acts all pompous. But if you're annoyed by this, I will say that he gets absolutely humiliated in many sections of this story. So Tegan joins the Doctor in exploring the spaceship, as Adric and Nyssa kind of steal the equipment there, upgrading most of the TARDIS. Eventually, the Doctor and Tegan meet the 3 aliens controlling the ships, being the Urbankans. So in the middle, there is the leader, Monarch, and to his sides are Enlightenment and Persuasion. And they are 4 days away from making another visit to Earth, as it has taken 2,000 years to reach it again. The Urbankans ask Tegan on what the modern human looks like, and she begins to sketch them a picture. And all I'm going to say is, Tegan is a bloody good artist, and why does she want to be a air stewardess when she could become an artist just absolutely baffles me. Anyway, while this happens, Nyssa gets separated from Adric, causing him to try and find the rest. This causes Monarch to send them all to get refreshments, where the 3 find Nyssa already there, with a Greek man named Bygone. Another quick thing, Monarch attempts to break into the TARDIS during this, and you can actually see a crew member crouching behind some boxes. Anyway, we also meet Kikuchi, who is an indigenous Australian, who has this conversation with Tegan.
Hulalaga yitanga kukuchi. Injinta ungana intanga.
Angelawa Yintanga Tegan.
Tigan. No ango bo unkupong.
Kupong. Markanem Peter.
Now this is an extremely strange scene for me. The first and most obvious reason to point out is why doesn't the TARDIS translate what they're saying? Or is the language not on the TARDIS's databank? Another thing is, how does Tegan know how to speak this language? Because Janet Fielding confirmed that originally she was meant to speak Aboriginal, but since us Australians know, there are about 500 indigenous tribes, and they all speak different languages. So Fielding picked Tiwi, which also begs larger questions. The main one is that the language of Tiwi comes from the Tiwi Islands, which are above the city Darwin, where there are about 2,000 people living there, mostly Aboriginal. But the issue comes from the fact that she is from Brisbane, which is located at the other side of the country, so how the hell does Tegan know how to speak Tiwi? And it's not like she learnt it from school or anything, because indigenous languages were definitely not taught in schools, especially when she would have been young in the 60s or 70s, where they're just getting rights. But anyway, sorry for the tangent, because it just annoys me as an Australian. I know how BS this scene is, and I don't know if anyone in the UK especially fell for this, because it was clearly overlooked. So, back to the story. We also meet two more characters from different cultures. The first is Princess Villagra, who is Mayan, and Lin Futu, a Chinese Mandarin. So it is very obvious that 4 different ancient cultures are on this ship, and that it is quite strange on what Monarch's plan is. The cliffhanger is that 2 more people show up, looking exactly like Tegan's drawing, announcing that they've already met the Doctor, because they are Enlightenment and Persuasion. For part 2, we find out the Urbankans have secretly stored 3 billion of their own kind on this ship, as their home world was destroyed from their sun. By using the estimate that each generation is 25 years old, and that Bygone has been on the ship for at least 100 generations, the Doctor calculates that it would roughly take 2,500 years to travel from Earth to Urbanka and back. The Doctor also has to use his hat and his sonic screwdriver to stop the TARDIS team from being surveyed, and he finds the Urbankans extremely suspicious. Then the group eventually gets split up, with the Doctor and Tegan being together again, where they go to the recreational space, where they watch each culture do their traditional dance and or fight. My problem with this is because it causes the story to go to a complete stop, making part 2 the boring and useless part in this story. Meanwhile, Nyssa and Adric explore the ship, where they come across different rooms. The first one is a fluoro chamber with Aboriginals gardening, then an oxygenless room with Greeks using computers without space helmets, and then a room where the Chinese are performing operations on each other. This is primarily shown when a Greek soldier gets stabbed through the chest in the recreational space and walks away like nothing happened to the operation table, where his hull gets magically mended. Eventually, the Doctor and Tegan meet up with Bygone in their quarters, where they get this reveal for the cliffhanger.
This compound is not me. This is me.
I'm just gonna say it, but this is one of the best cliffhangers in the entire show for me, as it grabs his fairly mediocre story and flips it on his head. So, Bygone does this great exposition dump in the beginning of part 3, which I'll quickly summarise. So he reveals that all humans on the ship are androids besides the 4 leaders, who were once promised to be leaders of their respective cultures, but were kidnapped and had their consciousness uploaded to a completely metal body. But unlike Cybermen, they keep most of their emotions, as the 3 Urbankans are also androids, to be immortal as well. And it also explains how Enlightenment and Persuasion were able to transform into humans. But we also learned that Urbanka was not destroyed by its sun, but Monarch depleted its resources and shrunk the population to his ship. Then Monarch can use this population to rehabilitate Earth, and also to be able to help him be able to travel faster than the speed of light, to meet himself as God, for some reason. Also, he has this poison, which is most likely used on the Urbankans, that if a trillionth of a gram touches flesh, it would reduce the person to the size of a grain of salt. Now, this plan is absolutely bonkers, and most of it doesn't even make any sense. And the main point is it kind of ruins the point of the cultures being there, because it doesn't really explain why he needs 4 representatives of 4 different cultures. Anyway, Tegan freaks out about this and wants to return to the TARDIS, where the Doctor and her have this interaction with each other.
Now, just keep calm.
Oh, we've got to get out of here. We've got to get to the TARDIS and get out of here.
Not yet. Please, will you stop thinking of yourself for
I'm
once?
not thinking of myself. We've got to get to Earth and warn them.
Of what? Who'll believe us? We'll be laughed at.
We can try.
Yes, another way.
Doctor?
Yes, just coming now. Stay here. You'll be perfectly safe. I won't be very long.
I won't stay here.
Yes, you will. In here, you can't be seen. Out there, you can. You stay here.
I will say that I do find this quite entertaining, as it shows that Peter Davison has already fit in the role quite comfortably. and that I find it funny when Five shouts at someone, as he is too nice to take seriously. This isn't the only crash out of this episode, as Adric and Nyssa are talking to Monarch, where Adric also learns a more biased point of view of the story, which he actually agrees to. The thing is, Nyssa doesn't, and states that they are no better than the Master, which causes Adric to start explaining to Monarch who the Master is, as well as the Time Lords and the TARDIS.
But I'm interested in this, machine of his.
The TARDIS? Mm-hmm. Short for time and relative dimensions in space.
Fascinating. It's very small. I mean, is it not uncomfortable?
No, the interior's in a different dimension.
Really?
Yes, it's quite
Why
large.
don't you shut up?
Oh, mind your manners, my dear. Go on, boy.
Shortly after this, Adric goes searching for the Doctor, as he wants to ask his permission for Monarch to explore the insides of the TARDIS, but Nyssa is held back as she is hypnotized. Adric wanders around and finds a stressed Tegan, who also wants to go to the TARDIS, but since she has the key to it, she refuses to let Adric and Monarch in, as she knows about his intentions leading to this.
Adric, you can come with me or get out of my way. What's it going to be?
But everything's all right, I tell you. And in any way, you can't get into the TARDIS.
Oh, can't I? You forget, I was given this when we left it.
Well, I'll take that.
You will not! Adric, I'm warning you! Get out of my way!
No! Now look, I'm not going to let you do anything silly.
Tegan uses this time to run into the TARDIS and begin to start tapping mindlessly at buttons. Now, going back to the Doctor and Bygone, he is continuing to do his exposition dump, but Lin Futu overhears it, and since Lin Futu doesn't want to be punished, he snitches on them to Monarch, Enlightenment, and Persuasion. As this happens, the Doctor finds the hypnotized Nyssa in a cell, beginning her transformation into an android, but luckily he saves her. When she comes out, she asks the Doctor if she can borrow his sonic screwdriver and a lead pencil, and then Adric shows up, after regaining consciousness, to reveal to the Doctor that Tegan is trying to move the TARDIS, which she actually was able to dematerialize. And then Persuasion and some Greek soldiers are ready to execute the Doctor for the cliffhanger. Part 4 begins with Nyssa using the lead pencil and Sonic to immobilize the guards, and Persuasion takes them all in, and sends Bygone to be reprogrammed. On their way, they see where the TARDIS has ended up, which is floating in space, just outside the spaceship. And they all meet up with Monarch, where he gives one last warning to the Doctor, holding Nyssa hostage if he disobeys him again. Then, the Doctor and Adric return to their quarters, where the Doctor starts verbally praising Monarch, as he removes his hat and the jammer to the Monopticon. Then, he makes his way to the recreational space, and he notices the zombie-like Bygone sitting there. Then, he absolutely humiliates Adric.
Now, listen to me, you young idiot. You're not so much gullible as idealistic. I suppose it comes from your deprived, delinquent background. Monarch is the greatest being in the known universe for evil. He will destroy Earth and much more if he's not stopped.
Back there, you
Yes,
see-
back there he could hear us. Here he can't. I'm playing for time.
But you're wrong, Doctor. He's civilized.
Do you want to save Nyssa?
Of course I do.
Then shut up and listen.
I love how Adric is treated throughout this story, as he deserves it for siding with the bad guys, and for being rude to the girls. Anyway, the Doctor meets with Lin Futu again, promising him freedom, and so he agrees to send out his dancers and the dragon so he can swipe Bygone, and as this happens, the Doctor frees Nyssa. Once they get Bygone and reprogram him, he's able to get Villagra and Kikuchi on their side, so they can release all the dancers out at once to distract Monarch. This leads to the iconic set piece of the story, where the Doctor ties a rope around him, with Adric leading it so he can fly through space to return to the TARDIS. And since he has a higher tolerance to the cold vacuum of space, he can spend quite a lot of time just floating around with a space helmet on. But when he just jumps off, Persuasion enters, and he is forced to return for him and Adric to disable Persuasion and throw his hard drive out. Then, once he is back floating again, Enlightenment enters and knocks Adric over and throws the rope out, so the Doctor is left stranded. Luckily, Adric is able to get up and also defeat Enlightenment, fully redeeming himself for betraying the TARDIS team. The Doctor then grabs a cricket ball out of his pocket, where he throws it at a wall of the ship, and the force of the ball bouncing back is able to propel him back to the TARDIS, which is physically impossible, by the way. When he returns, he is able to send the TARDIS back, but Monarch cuts the oxygen, to where the Doctor gives his helmet away to Tegan, as he enters a trance, and a new helmet is rebuilt for him. This leads to this great line by Monarch.
Now all I have to do is wait. And that is something I do very, very well indeed.
As this happens, Nyssa's helmet begins to break, but luckily the Doctor's is fitted on, to where he grabs the poison, and this hilarious scene happens.
No, Doctor!
Now this does contradict to what Bygone said earlier, of how if a trillionth of a gram touches someone, it would reduce them to the same size of a grain of salt. But it can be answered why the whole bottle is able to reduce Monarch to the size of roughly a salt shaker, because he is mostly an android and is no longer organic. The story sort of abruptly ends with Bygone stating that he and the others don't want to lift home, as they want to have a fresh start on a new planet. But there is still one more scene, which is very reminiscent of the early years with William Hartnell, where on the TARDIS, Nyssa suddenly faints for the cliffhanger, leading directly to the next story, Kinder. So this story really surprised me on rewatch. When I first saw it, I must have not found it interesting because I wasn't very keen on this Doctor already. But for this review, I will say I've really enjoyed To Doomsday. There's something about the plot and the clever twists and turns, and the compelling villain that really interests me. But what surprised me the most is that this is Peter Davidson's first story made, and he acts like he's already been in the role for a couple of months, which was really good. Finally, having the 5th Doctor post-regeneration is just really fun, and it just annoys me on how Castrovalva was mainly held down because of this. I will say this story is not perfect though, because the obvious little nitpicking like Tegan speaking Tiwi or Monarch's plan is completely stupid despite his great performance and his cunning attitude. And then there's also Enlightenment, who is just really underused, as well as the other representatives, as they practically do nothing. The first half of the story is also very slow and isn't very fun, as well as the plot hole that the representatives have no need in the plot, and Monarch's plan as well. I will say this, as much as I've been bashing Adric throughout this story, he works really well when he disagrees with the Doctor and isn't on the same side, as it adds a bit more complexity to his character. I'm also going to say that there wasn't any companion really left out, as Tegan spends a lot of time in the TARDIS in the final half of the story, but also has some very great scenes early on with the Doctor, and Nyssa does quite a lot, knowing that most fans would agree that she got the least to do. But I completely disagree, as this is nothing compared to the next story, where, spoiler alert, she's not really in it. But yeah, To Doomsday is a fun watch, and I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen any of the 5th Doctor, or I recommend it to someone who hasn't revisited this story in a while, as I believe it is highly underrated. That is why I give To Doomsday a 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching.